Welcome to Nintendo Everything. I'm Tom, and I'm joined by my buddy Miles to do a trailer breakdown, full analysis of. It's not even a trailer. This 10-minute gameplay session by Eiji Aonuma about the Tears of the Kingdom game coming out in May. Welcome, Miles, to the channel. Thanks for coming and joining me, my resident Breath of the Wild expert.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really hope that I can talk through this in a way that helps to clarify what I see with this. I know there's been a lot of trepidation regarding Tears of the Kingdom. People feel that they have not shown enough as well, and kind of hopefully help to make sure that people are optimistic about this game. I'm very optimistic about it after what I've seen, but I imagine that a lot of that's going to be contextual to what people want from Zelda and how they're coming off of Breath of the Wild.
I do want to say, too, like, this gameplay trailer has recontextualized all the old trailers, but didn't show a ton new, just clarified that yes, this is that, yes, this is this. What we showed was from that, from all these different key vocab turns they've given us
Yes.
in this trailer. So, we're gonna open Eiji Aonuma out of the black void. He finally has some good news for us, so I think he gets the white background this time, instead of saying we have nothing to show this time. And all the older kind of directs when they talk about this game.
And that's cinematic language for you right there.
So first, me and you, I'm sure, immediately like, okay, we see Link on the horse. What's different? Is the HUD different? That's what I did. I checked for the HUD. Do we see any differences? But it didn't seem like there was any major differences that you saw either, right?
Well, so I don't actually play with I have never once played with the normal mode HUD, which is really funny because as much as I consider myself an expert on Breath of the Wild, I didn't realize that you could push and pull Magnesis until like 4 months ago because I never saw those prompts. So, first playthrough people, if you're playing this game for the first time, play for about an hour with the normal HUD.
Right, and we see Link is shirtless, not a lot of equipment, so I can assume this is somewhat early, maybe.
I'm going to assume that this is his the old shirt and old pants equivalent.
Right. I mean, he does have like a bow and arrow. He does have a shield. He has a horse, which is, I guess, so I don't know how early you'll get those. I don't know if there's going to be a great plateau sequence.
Well, it is
I doubt
interesting that there's 4 hearts. I do think that there is going to be a great plateau sequence, but I think the fact that he has 4 hearts here probably means that you're going to end the sequence with the ability to get either a heart piece or a heart container, my apologies, or a stamina vessel, just like in Breath of the Wild. And they've chosen the 4 hearts. Possibly because Eiji Aonuma is elderly and his eyes are failing him, and he might fail at combat. I don't know. Ironically enough, it would be very funny if they gave him 4 hearts specifically for the survivability of when he gets hit. In case they wanted to show that, I genuinely don't know what their plan was.
Again, I have doubts that he's actually playing it.
I do as well, but someone had to record this footage.
Yeah, someone to play it. So first off, and this is something he ignores in this trailer. Or in this gameplay bit, which we see on the top of the ridge of this mountain, this green tornado swirl.
Yes, which has been visible for a long time. And I thought for a while that was what turned out to be the Ascend power, the ability to phase through objects. I think this game, gameplay loop-wise, is going to... it's probably clearly, at this point, split between... going between levels. The sky and... We know for a fact that there are caves. What I do think we saw from this trailer was a focus on gameplay mechanics and player tools. I think that might be why he didn't use this green swirl, if that is a case of rising to the sky. My guess is there are sky islands which are accessible from the ground, and then some that are not accessible from the ground. They have to be reached from the sky itself. But the sky islands that are accessible from the ground can be... climbed to with rewind, and I'm going to assume that the rewind ability is triggered by player proximity. We will see these green blocks fall onto the surface so that we know that there's a sky island accessible to us, or a lot of them might already be on the ground, and you might be encouraged to try and highlight objects with rewind in general. But I do believe that this green swirl is most likely a way to get to the sky. I think it would just take us to a different sky island than the one that we explored in this trailer in particular.
Well, we'll get to the Sky Island. So, but he does go to a couple different ones. We only see him travel to one of them, like from the ground, and then he's gone like immediately. First, we see stables are back, which is nice. We see a similar NPC like dialogue. He needs to reach his friend, whoever this is.
Well, it's
Um,
Beetle, it seems.
I think it looks like Beetle. We see it for such a quick glimpse.
But there's a Korok. I mean, we see him wearing a giant backpack, it looks like, or he's attached to someone else's giant backpack. So, I don't know. But Koroks are clearly back, whether or not they reward you with seeds, or whether or not they are as densely layered throughout the game. I don't know, but I do think that...
are they just like NPCs here that are already revealed?
But in particular, I think that this trailer is solely focused on gameplay mechanics. So if there are any things in terms of format, narrative, or discoveries to be made, they are really not focusing on them. We will see a cave later, but there is almost no exploration into the cave.
There's almost no exploration period.
No,
I think this early sequence is the largest distance traveled. Right. So yeah, we see the ever ominous falling block with the green mist trail afterwards, and Anumi immediately like fade cuts to it. So part of the game would probably be finding where they land, just kind of like how Shooting Stars landed in Breath of the Wild. You're like, oh, I see it, I have to go and find it. But this one gives you a very tangible reward, which is the ability to rewind using the recall feature that object back to where it fell from, but also it seemed almost like infinite. Like it just like you could just choose. I guess that bar, that cycle wheel we see here is how long it can go up for before it starts falling again. I imagine.
Right. I would imagine that there's a limited amount of time to rewinds, and it might be, and in fact it most likely is, based on the distance in which the object has already traveled. It is interesting that they're using a wheel if that's the case, but obviously a wheel you can kind of tick down faster, and Breath of the Wild was very astute to use wheels to depict time, stamina, and recharges. Right. They're very easily understood as opposed to meters.
So I do want to point out the HUD difference here. There is a difference, and if you see the L button in the top left, we see an icon that almost looks blurred out at this point, or it's just not in use. Right there, that changes when he's going to use recall. See how it's now an orange circle?
Right.
But so this edit, I think, is to hide the other abilities. So he's going to cut. They're going to cut and like kind of fade into this because he's switched the abilities. So there's a different menu, a different ability that we kind of think replaces the Sheikah Slate, that they're hiding from how that maybe they don't want to reveal the other ones they didn't reveal, but that L button is how we're going to access the different kind of, I guess, weird Sheikah arm abilities that we'll see.
So they're actually Zonai tech, it seems.
Zonai.
Yeah, they use a different I mean, Sheikah are associated with the color blue, and it seems that Zonai are associated with the color green. There's also a diegetic reason for the Sheikah Slate not being back, which is that Link gave it back to Zelda, and we know that Zelda's fate is not necessarily great.
In question.
It's in question. Yeah. We don't know how she's doing.
That top left, a bit. That's how you cycle through these Zonai abilities, one being recall, which is a very exciting ability. We've seen it used in an older trailer with one of those steel metal balls.
We've seen it used twice, actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and then we see it here. We've seen them use it on this object before in a trailer.
Yes, in the September 2022 trailer.
Okay, now we arrive. He says you can just pick wherever you want, right? We could go to another island, but you can glide off and to a different one. Whatever one that strikes your fancy, which is fun. That's just part of the exploration.
It's also notable that all of the Sky Islands have sort of conic tails at the bottom, probably for the player to glide towards and latch on in case they want to go to a different island than the one that has a horizontal landing for them. So that's a pretty smart game design decision that you can kind of course correct and get to an island. But if you don't have the stamina to do it, then you're probably not going to make it to the top. And so that's... I think that's a really interesting way to kind of gatekeep progress for players without stopping them from finding solutions to things or doing things early enough. I think that there was an attempt to kind of power up gate in the original Breath of the Wild, but it's a little uneven, and I think it's a little too easy to just beeline your stamina upgrades and then get anywhere in the world. Now, another thing to note is that at the top of Mount Lanayru here, there is a tower, which wasn't there before. I believe that was visible
Right.
in the February 2023 trailer, either way. And I have to assume that's Nadra flying there based on the shape of the head. So that's almost definitely Mount Lanayru. So it is very interesting that they've made a tower there. And then there's also another glowing tower, which is above what looks to be the area around Zora's domain.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the island covered in thunderstorm, and Sky Island covered in thunderstorm in the distance here too.
Right.
That's interesting.
Now, it's
because that
interesting,
might be
too,
a
because...
constant
Yeah,
obstacle.
it might be a constant obstacle, or it's just a way to basically give that particular cluster of islands its own environment without...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that cloud might be permanently there, as that's the rain island that you have to deal with that on that island, and the puzzles and the exploration are tailored around the rain there. I think that'd be an exciting kind of way to use weather, which is clearly back though, clearly back. Yeah, he's given us a good view. So he's just in this gameplay bit now on a new island. Just cut new island, and he's now selected the fuse ability in his Zonai arm in the top left. So we're done with recall. Anything you see here in this shot, I think, is mostly Sky Islands.
No, it's mostly
Not a
Skylands.
lot.
We have seen this large floating cube before. It's barely visible in the 2023 trailer. It's very interesting that, in particular, they're basically sticking to areas just within Hyrule Field and West Necluda. They don't want us seeing anything above Akala, except for the brief shot within what's most likely the Akala Citadel in the 2023 February trailer, where we see the Blood Moon while Link is between an arch. So it seems like they're really trying to just keep things localized to a very small area of the map,
Right.
To leave us some things to discover on our own. But
No, and there's a lot. By the way, I can't help but notice the HUD of the map.
it's really
The
detailed.
map is really detailed. That's an interesting thing that we didn't see before. So clearly you have to fill in the map with something. So we see a new enemy called a construct, which comes from Zonai lore rather than Sheikah lore. And we brought up Zonai a few times. And Myles, I don't know, you know probably know a little bit more about the Zonai tribe than me. So do you want to explain who the Zonai are in Zelda lore in general? What is this hinting towards, if anything?
So we don't know a lot about the Zonai, really. However, the Zonai ruins are all throughout the Faron region.
In Breath of the Wild.
In
right?
Breath of the Wild, yes. And so we at the very least knew of their existence. In the 2016 E3 demonstration, all of the small, like, green rock pillars, they're kind of sheer pillars that usually have treasure at the top of them. There's one at the Great Plateau. There's quite a few around Hyrule Field. All of those used to have Zonai dragon designs before being changed to a more sheer kind of faceless design. And whether or not that was a decision made in development to kind of obscure the mystery of the Zonai, or whether it was just a case of they thought it was too busy and it didn't really match the aesthetic of the game, either one is really plausible. We don't know. But all we know about the Zonai is that they are a very different kind of race. Now, what's really interesting as well is that there are times in which we see this kind of blue light upon their death throughout the game, but there is one particular area in which we see a kind of greenish blue energy in the world, and that's actually at Satori Mountain, when the Lord of the Mountain is at the top congregating with the animals. And so I think that there is going to be some element of the Lord of the Mountain in this game that kind of demystifies that character, just because it's such a rare color. And it's the only time that we see that color in Breath of the Wild otherwise.
And I think you just assume in Breath of the Wild it's like an Aurora Borealis or something.
Yeah, that
you
it's
just
a unique
assume
creature.
It's some kind of, yeah. But, and why I want to bring this up is he picks up the Zonai charge item from this enemy, which I think is like going to be the most important economy item in this game. Are these Zonai charge or whatever energy from the Zonai that you then use to use these abilities in your top left.
I think it is very interesting that they are implementing a magic system of a sort of economy like that into the game, because the 2014 build showed a magic bar initially. It's worth noting that the 2014 build also had the map complete. If you look at comparisons between the 2014 map and the 2017 map, it's basically the same. The only difference that I was able to spot was Typhlo Ruins wasn't there. Typhlo Ruins being the area that's completely enshrouded in darkness. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this game's development was focused on early game Sky Island production, and then mid-development was focused on mechanics and features. The game was delayed in particular because they mentioned new features being added. So I have to assume that the team had a spontaneous moment of genius or creativity, and they realized that it was worth implementing into the game. Genuinely wouldn't be surprised if that was the vehicles, too, that they decided to implement.
Right.
So
Which is here we'll get the next one, the fuse one, which is an exciting ability. The expansion of tools that we will get from fuse is kind of otherworldly. It's kind of hard to even wrap your head around how much kind of a variety we'll get out of the fuse ability. And even in this, he gets a choice to use the tree branch or the old shield in combining with, and now we've confirmed, any object in the overworld.
right.
Not just other weapon.
I have to assume that there is, to some extent, a limitation to the object types.
Right.
I have to assume that anything that can be displaced by the player can be fused.
Yes.
Which,
anything that
to
has
be
a
fair,
physics
is
to it.
that's what a player would want in the first place. Anything that they
Yes.
could interact with. I do think it's really great that this menu is so streamlined. In particular, you press the button that you would normally press, and so it's a very intuitive menu as opposed to like, I don't know, flicking between them or something like that. You know exactly what to press because that's going to be the button you're going to press when you use the fuse.
It's whichever is equipped. Whichever equipped and can be combined. So the bow can't be combined with the boulder, so that's not.
Most likely, bows are going to make
The
use
arrow
of the
you have
inventory.
to do it in a different menu.
Yeah, that's going to make use of the inventory button, which is wise. It makes a lot of sense, I think.
And we see that later, so
yeah.
we'll talk about that.
Right.
So he does mention durability will change upon fusion. The tree branch durability is, he said, like substantially larger when you combine it with the stone, which makes sense. So stone clearly is this type of durable plus attack, probably type of combination you can do. You make it more durable and you make it a bit stronger.
My guess is that the durability of the branch remains the same, but it's the boulder that's added to the durability pool. We know that Breath of the Wild's durability system is pretty much based on it's just like raw numbers. It might as well have an HP bar, and if you can count out the weapon's durability and it will be consistent. If you look at save editors, it seems like durability is measured in the hundreds unit, which is probably just a programming thing, and it decreases by 100 every single time, which most people have just sort of streamlined into saying it decreases by 1. So my guess is, for example, a boulder might have a unit of, let's say 16. 16 seems like a pretty fair value to me. And a tree branch has 4. So now you can use this weapon 20 times. Durability was a rather controversial system. I love it, personally, but I also understand that for a lot of people, it created a sense of anxiety, and it created a sense of the need to preserve what you obtain. And so I think that this is a really good way of making sure that things that you like have a long lifespan. And I would also imagine that that is a bit of a decision. I don't know if you can unfuse a weapon, but it might make sense for if you have a weapon that's close to breaking, you can hold on to it for a while until you find an optimal thing to fuse it to, and then you just continue on, and your weapon's repaired, and it's a brand new weapon, and that's kind of a really, and I feel like one thing that that people count out with Nintendo is their ability to rethink the obvious and kind of turn the obvious into the new. I knew a lot of people who wanted the ability to repair weapons, and their ideas were always visit your local blacksmith, which sounds horrible because this is a game about adventure, and I would have to be constantly warping back to Hot No Village so that I can get a friggin' NPC to restore my crap for me because I'm too scared to let the weapon break. Oh, whoa, it's me. I might have to make a compromise.
Oh no.
And the second one was using materials that you collect to repair weapons, which I think is a fair thing. You can do it in the menu, but that's also a decision that makes itself. The decision being, my weapon is close to breaking. I'm just gonna go into the menu and I'm gonna slam items into it until it's back to its original luster. And then that also makes certain areas of the game kind of more valuable to an extent, which is interesting, but then that leads to more farming. And there's already enough farming in Breath of the Wild. I think too much farming. I already think that the food items have way too much of an imbalance of being good and way too much of an imbalance of how available they are. Just go to Faron, get your durians, get your mighty bananas, and you're good to go. Even though mighty porgies are better, mighty bananas are just more abundant. So that's kind of generally a design element of Breath of the Wild that I think could have been significantly worse with material repairs, and especially with blacksmith repairs. It's one of the most brain-dead, terrible ideas that you could possibly have, but it's the idea that people had because that's what every other game does, and that's the solution that every other company has come up with. It's a logical solution because it's true to the real world. Fusion is the Nintendo way of doing things. It's that way in which they rethink the obvious and create a system that's not just about retaining neutral, but about gaining opportunity and creating new emergent gameplay states. And that's
a great
brilliant.
Point. Yes, the fusion is such an aha moment. And we've seen it in prior trailers. Now we know confirmed what it is and what's happening and kind of how it works.
Right. I think I believe the only FromSoft game to release on Switch is Dark Souls Remastered. And I'm not just a Nintendo gamer, so I have played other FromSoft games like Elden Ring and Bloodborne. There is a reason that by Elden Ring, weapon durability is just not in the game because it's a brain dead system. It doesn't make much sense. It doesn't work in the flow of the game. It's pointless. And I think that in most cases, weapon durability is just kind of a worry that players that it's a psychological worry rather than a mechanical worry, because ultimately once you get to a certain area, you're just going to repair your weapon. You're going to eat the cost that it takes to repair the weapon, and
those
that's
games
going to be
aren't they're not systemic like this one, where
no, a lot of them are RPGs.
Playing with multiple weapon types and experimenting is part of the systemic joy of Breath of the Wild. And with this game, it's going to be, it's clearly that's where the investment is going into with this game, is that systemic play. Where you pick up a random item and that's what you have for the next few minutes, and that's the fun you're going to have, and then you can do another one or fuse with another one.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, because Nintendo is very good at basically having, I don't even know if there's a good term for this, but it's the term that I hear a lot is multiplicative game design, which is that everything that's implemented into the game is not redundant. It's always going to have more than one use. Cooking is always going to have more than one mechanic tied to it. And in particular, it seems like everything in this game is multiplicative to an extent. There was a lot of multiplicative elements of Breath of the Wild, but there were some that were also additive, too. Certain systems that only kind of interacted with themselves. In particular, I think armor was particularly egregious in that armor kind of only interacted with damage values and upgrades, so it was a purely linear system. So it seems like they're doing their best to create more multiplicative, quadrilateral systems, so to speak. I believe that's the correct term. If I use that wrong, I'm so sorry. And that's Fuse is just a really good idea in that respect, because it fixes the durability problem by not removing durability. I know a lot of people's immediate solution was, oh, I don't like durability, let's just get rid of it. And Nintendo said, clearly this is a problem, but we're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's not what we do. And so they rethought the system, and they found a solution that personally I'm very excited about, and I think that the average person can be excited about.
Yeah, so, and it, of course, Fusion has unique attributes when using bows that we see here, where you press up on the D-pad, and while you're in kind of the pullback range, you can attach. And this was exciting to me. One, we see a menu difference here, right? It's just a scroll wheel for regular items. Now, is this just the attach menu, and this is unique to that? But Fusion also works with bows and regular collectibles, which really, outside of cooking, which was very limited for many objects, there's only so much they could do, but they had so many objects you can collect. Now you can get really unique abilities on your bows too. It gives you another reason to have the choo-choo jellies, right? As he'll show off here, that he's going to use the ice one and freeze the enemy.
Now I want to stay focused on
the wind one.
Yeah, I want to stay focused on this menu here, because I want to kind of go over what I think a lot of these items might do. I think that in particular, I'm always more focused on what systems are going to do. I think that attaching raw meat to an arrow is going to look very funny, but I also think that it's going to have a very practical application. In particular, I think that this is going to add some depth to the idea of animal baiting, which is a mechanic that was usable but really cumbersome.
Yeah, because you had to like sneak and drop food.
Right,
Where
or
now you
throw the
can
food
just-
from like a cliff.
Or throw. But that wasn't, yeah. But now, if you can connect food to an arrow and then boom, send it right in front of the animal, then that actually makes it a fun system to engage with.
You'll notice that the amber is completely different too. I actually would not be surprised if all gemstones are fashioned like arrows in this game, and so now there is a decision to use them probably for, you know, really high damage values or to sell them. But it's good for ambers and opals because those items, while they had high sell values, were not nearly as valuable as sapphires, topazes, rubies, and diamonds. And so it'll be good to have kind of these stronger arrow versions.
Yeah, and it does seem though, like, and we'll see as it goes on, the monster parts are what are going to gain like the biggest, like really specific boons to your arrows. Because we eat the ice choo-choo jelly, freezes the enemy, gives you like an ice arrow, and then we'll see later the Keese eyeball gives you homing.
Right. Which I was wrong. I was wrong. I thought it was the octo balloon.
Yeah, which I guess makes more sense now in retrospect that the eyeball would give you homing.
Yeah, that's really clever. It's also worth noting that constructs very specifically seem to drop weapons that are sharp in implements, so it seems like constructs are more or less designed to give you arrowheads. And for those of you who have read Creating a Champion, they do explain where ancient arrows come from. They're ancient Sheikah daggers affixed to arrowheads. So I think that they probably took some inspiration from that diegetic decision.
And imagine they're super strong against Zonai themselves then.
Right.
Yeah.
That, or they just kind of offer a flat damage upgrade. It is worth noting,
so
we haven't pointed this out, is that a lot of items, they do just show a linear weapon number go up, basically, when you fuse. So
right.
you kind of know the damage values immediately.
They tell you, and we get a smoke bomb mushroom shield.
This makes my stealth gamer heart just so happy that you just have these smoke bombs. And it is interesting because another kind of unbalanced element of Breath of the Wild, or at the very least one that was relatively underwhelming, was shields. Shields that when you parry, you just negate all damage. So in theory, a pot lid was exactly as good as a royal shield, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having shields have a reason to just be used as a regular guard is pretty smart, and it also gives some value to lower level shields. Those shields might be more prime for fusions because you can use those shields as kind of disposable, already kind of cooked and waiting strategic options.
Yep, and so next is the next Zonai arm ability. That's what I'm calling them, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good name.
Is the Ultra Hand, famous
That is
Nintendo
not a good
toy.
name.
Right. I mean, it's the reference to the Nintendo toy from the 70s, right? Like
oh my god, is it? That's kind of awesome.
Well, so you can see in the top left the icon is this long weird hand, that is, I don't know. I feel like it's a reference to you at a distance, like the toy, right? Again, this is probably just a cheeky thing they're laughing about. Grab something and move it around, not with your own hand, right? It's something, because this ability is not fuse, works on stuff you have equipped, right?
Possibly. Yeah, that is your hand. I would be interested in seeing if you could fuse from the pause menu.
Whatever, right? But you know what I mean, like something you have.
Right.
Where Ultra Hand is about objects that are on the ground.
Yes.
Right? That are not being equipped by you or cannot even be equipped, right? So that's kind of why I think it's a funny little, and it's magnesis in a way, but on every object. That's why I don't think magnesis is coming back in some of these abilities, because Ultra Hand, you can move the trees and the fans and then fuse them together to make a bigger object. And it looks like that just happens automatically. You just put them next to each other and a goo comes out and just plop, glues them together any way you want. And he's going to show off kind of you can change and you can make it a different kind of, you can unstick and move and stick in a different shape. So a lot of freedom in this system here.
Right, and one thing that's really cool about this system, I theorize that this sort of adhesive would be a resource. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think this might just be part of the Ultra Hand ability, which is even better because that just means that you can use Ultra Hand whenever you want and whenever you see a problem, and you can solve it right away. I think that's very cool. But it's also interesting because it adds to the sort of physics-based system of the game, in which you're now required to think about, balance. You actually do have to make sure that your vehicle is capable of standing upright.
Yeah, the only resource management I see is the battery of the machine, because clearly there's like machine objects you need for a vehicle to run, and in this case, the fan is what's doing that. And it seemed like all they shown off is the fan, as like the motor, the electronic, and there's a battery that will deplete as you use it. So you can't just unlimited movement with any vehicle.
Now, it is interesting. That does look like a completely different enemy from the other.
By the way, I just noticed this. I don't think it's an enemy.
You think it's an NPC?
Up. Look, let me frame by frame. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and it says talk. You're so right. Ranger construct. Okay.
So Zonais are not all enemies here. They can also be NPCs. I wonder what.
Which, yeah, I mean, it is cool that they're kind of expanding the races of the game.
Right, but the fact that they're not all enemies, they're not all mindless, just kind of like the Guardians or something, right? Just always bad.
Right,
here,
which raises the question of why they're bad. Will this be I keep thinking of like the Ravenbeak situation from Metroid Dread, where there's two different factions of Chozo. It would be interesting if there's two different factions of Zonai. Again, similar to Sheikah and Yiga, actually.
This looks a little dungeon-y to me with the snake mouth entrance. I know it might not be a full-scale dungeon, but an interior, an entrance of some design of human-made proportions, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting because they do go inside of it, and you can see very briefly at the end, there is some sort of mural or it looks like a forge. I thought that he was walking up to it to show that there would be some sort of crafting or forge of some kind, but they completely ignore it. And instead,
it's a really small space.
Yeah. Instead, it's about showing Ascend, and Ascend is a pretty insane tool, which has been in the game for a long time.
What's great about Ascend is Breath of the Wild's moment of you can just climb anything. We all just blew our minds. What? You can climb any. Nintendo did it again. They saved the open world genre, and now they're like, yeah, you can still climb anything, but that's not good enough. Now you can just immediately warp through any ceiling in the game.
Right. And it is very interesting because he says that there are some limitations, which means that there's probably going to be restrictions similar to the shrines not allowing you to use champion abilities. Yeah. But something like this, by the way, this I think is really funny. If we want to talk about like the intentions of this particular trailer, the fact that he goes into this cave, things that people have wanted for so long, and he immediately exits with Ascend. Right. That's not what this is about. You're going to discover all that on your own. This is about mechanics.
We see another ranger construct in the background here.
Right.
As well as a cooking, which cooking's back, big shock, right?
Yeah.
But he's going to ignore all that, and it looks like going through the snake head took like a second. This one being much longer, the ascend being much longer, it looks like there's a quite amount of distance you're ascending through there.
Right.
Which, to me, I thought the limitation was what counts as the ceiling, the thickness, right? No, I guess you can like swim through really thick. I like how ceilings that like a cave, an entire mountain, right? Something like that. So this is some enemies using fusion weapons themselves. And this is some classic Zelda 2 knockback here.
Yes.
But you don't die. You don't take the fall damage. If you're on a skyline and fall off, you go into this kind of glide sequence.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities here for some really cool mechanics from here. I wouldn't be surprised if, we saw the Hawk, for example. That might be a late game upgrade, or it might be an ability you can use right away. And you know, obviously you could paraglide through here. There might even be some other inclusions to traveling through the air that similar to the hawk that you can unlock, or outfits that you know that let you like dive faster through the air, or drag.
Well, so we learned there's an accelerate button prompt that lets you dive bomb.
Right. Which I love how he lands in the water and it just completely splashes everywhere.
Yeah, again, they thought about this might take a while. Let's have an item, and I assume you can't dive bomb into land. That's why he chose water.
Probably not without hurting yourself. No.
Yeah. This is one of the best views of Hyrule we've gotten, though.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you know, YouTube compression. It's not the highest res view, but we're seeing a lot of the things we've seen a lot of in the other trailers, like this kind of pattern on the ground here.
Yeah, these Nazca lines, as I've been calling them.
But yeah, so that was a sequence he showed going up, a little bit of the new kind of Zonai arm abilities, specifically, you know, Ultra Hand and Fuse and Rewind or Recall, but a very limited look at, again, all these abilities we've seen hints of in the last trailer and the prior couple trailers, but we weren't like explicitly detailed or explained to us with proper context.
Yeah, it is very interesting that they have essentially just clarified the mechanics of the game. It's clear that it's larger, and the entire overworld has been like thoroughly remixed.
I just get a sense that this development team wants to show nothing. They want as much surprise about the game's kind of broader themes and story and gameplay and environments and set pieces and sequences as possible. And so this was yes, what you've seen in these trailers are what you think they are. Here's what they're called, and here's some very minimal examples of how they'd be used. But outside of that, you're not getting much more.
I think the big revelation is Fuse, and I have a feeling that people are going to be reacting to Fuse in probably a very divisive way. The idea of durability returning, but it's undeniable that this is their very Nintendo attempt to assuage that problem without outright removing it and without outright invalidating durability. There's probably still going to be weapons that you're going to want to just let break, and then there are going to be weapons that are more valuable for fusion. I think in particular this contextualizes trash, like you know, so to speak, like the rusty broadswords or sticks. Like, there's just no reason to use a tree branch after a certain period of time in this game. You know, after the Great Plateau, even within the Great Plateau, there's
you
no
mean
reason
in Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, in Breath of the Wild, there's no reason to use the tree branch, and now suddenly the tree branch might be a great fusion tool. You just keep a couple tree branches around so that you can fuse, you know, a lot of different things and make like a stronger, slightly durable weapon. You know, maybe the tree branch is the secret dark horse weapon of this game now that they've
it's
implemented
more like
that.
If each weapon has kind of a class modifier,
right?
Then maybe the tree branch or whatever, right, is a specific class that maybe it's kind of hard to find otherwise, or you need one in a pinch, right? Oh, I need this class modifier. Oh, there's a tree branch here. Let me just use that. Something like that. That makes the trash, as you called it, more useful longer into your playtime, maybe based on a passive modification it does on fusion.
It was very deliberate of them to in particular, they showed weapons that either had really extremely low durabilities, like the equivalent of the Boko spear and the tree branch and the farmer's pitchfork, and they showed how those could be more creatively implemented. So they've essentially taken the weapon economy of Breath of the Wild and made the gap between weapons and their usefulness a lot shorter and smaller. And so now a tree branch has the ability to become a more powerful weapon. You know, this does 6 damage. That's on par with the rusty broadsword, but it probably has, I would say, you know, 4 times the durability. You know, there's a boulder attached to it. And it's interesting, too, because you can also change the properties of certain weapons. You know, this is now a makeshift boulder breaker. So if you want to destroy an ore deposit, which previously you just would carry a sledgehammer around, now you can just quickly make a hammer that will break that will break apart ore deposits. And so that also kind of reduces the preciousness of certain item types. You know, you kind of always wanted a sledgehammer, a cobble crusher, or a stone smasher, because otherwise you would get to ore deposits and you have to bomb them, and the ores would go all over the place. Now they've kind of closed the gap of essential weaponry. And so they've essentially kind of taken away a lot of the burdens of the durability system. You know, that certain tools were covetous in a way. You know, elemental tools and things like that were very covetous, for sure. These guys are out of their mind. I'm just gonna say it. This game is out of its gourd. Just the sheer Breath of the Wild was already like, if it's not an immersive sim, it's as close to an immersive sim as a game of this, you know, style and genre could be. And they've just gone and blown their own systemic design out of the water.
Well, I think it's just fair to say that Zelda's genre has almost changed a bit. And Fujibayashi, the director, right, like, is just making everything that Skyward Sword wasn't.
Can we go back actually to the fuse thing, because we'll actually be able to see if fusion is just done and done, because he does fuse 2 items simultaneously, and I actually was not paying attention to if he could unfuse the stick. This will just answer this very quickly, and I apologize for interrupting you.
No, you're good. I was done in that sense.
Well, let's take a look here. Yeah, no, you can fuse that to the log club for a 3rd item. Okay, but it does seem like once it's fused, it's fused.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, so so it looks like if your fusion creates like a weapon. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
This is like a weapon with an inventory, with a name, a unique name, right? A log club. Now it's one weapon.
Yes.
And now you can fuse it to something else. But any last thoughts on this little gameplay snippet?
Yeah, it's clear that they're just showing that Tears of the Kingdom is a mechanically refined sequel with more decisions to be made. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to whet the player's appetite for playing an adventure that gives them a degree of freedom that's brand new, even though we had a degree of freedom that was brand new in 2017 in a video game called Breath of the Wild. The fact that they're really focused on players kind of seeing new opportunities for themselves is very interesting. I don't think that we're going to see much more of the game, to be perfectly honest. I think that this is it, and there might be a story trailer if they really, really want to do a story trailer. But I think that this is it for Tears of the Kingdom. The development is done, so there's nothing to they can show everything if they want. But when a game goes gold like this, I think that there is, you know, they spend that time, you know, kind of trying to optimize the engine or doing small bug fixes if they can. Like, it's not like they could just release the game today. In theory, they could, but it would be better in a month from now. You can get a lot of polishing done in 30 days. So I do think that there might be more opportunity to show story, but gameplay-wise, I think this is everything that they're open to show us for now.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm convinced, obviously I've always been, but I'm convinced that these additions will satisfy the large majority of people excited for Breath of the Wild 2, you know, in concept back in the day, but weren't sure how this game was going to capitalize and expand that concept, because everyone immediately thought about a sequel with this game. A Majora's Mask-esque, like, reuse of material, right?
Right. It makes sense for people to be, you know, worried, because Breath of the Wild, more so than any Zelda game before, was its map. Obviously, the systems were a huge part of the fun and appeal of the map, but discovering the map was the game. And a lot of people have trouble going back to Breath of the Wild because there's nothing new to find. Now, the people who enjoyed playing with systems could go back to Breath of the Wild over and over and over again, and to an extent, it's really hard to find everything in the map on a first playthrough unless you're extremely, extremely, extremely meticulous. But it seems like their vision of a sequel was to reuse a lot of assets and remix a lot of assets so that they could just focus on expanding on ideas. Dev time it's a commodity, and allocating time and resources to what you want to do and what decisions you want to make, you know, it's something that people have to consider. Reusing a lot of the map probably saved a lot of time in development to create features and to create new enemies, and I wouldn't be surprised if that time has allowed them to make a more robust story and a more robust set of dungeons. But if those aren't there, which I think they will be, but if they aren't there, we at the very least have very robust systems to play with. And so I think that even if Tears of the Kingdom is not the bigger and better sequel that everyone hopes it will be, with all of these great dungeons and a better story, it will at the very least be a formidable sequel to the systemic Breath of the Wild. And for a lot of people, that will be fun enough. But I have no doubt in my mind that they are taking complaints and criticisms to heart, and they're solving them in very Nintendo ways. So this lack of convention and this lack of conventional systems is really, really exciting for me. And I do hope that more games are able to get as creative with their systems as this.
Well, yeah, thank you, Myles, for joining me on short notice here as we watched the new gameplay segment from Tears of the Kingdom. I'm excited. I think I'm bullish as ever about this game, but I think that's all we can talk about for now before we explode. I think from hype. I don't know. I'm hype about it. I'm more hype than ever.
And hopefully anyone who's still worried about it, hope the game is coming out soon, and hopefully reviews will tell us more. But for now, for those of us who are excited, keep digging through those trailers, try replaying Breath of the Wild and seeing what you can find, and be positive. I think that the future is bright.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. This has been Nintendo Everything Trailer Breakdown. We'll see you next time.